Hello, folks. Back to it's Thursday, and I'm back to reading from Sri Sai Charitra, Sri Sai Sat Charitra, and I'm reading chapter 14, Ratanji's meeting with Sai. My obeisance to Sri Ganesha, to Sri Saraswati, and Sri Guru Maharaj, to the family deity, to Sri Sita Ramchandra, my most humble obeisance. I bow in reverence to the most venerable Guru Sri Sainath. Yeah. Glory to you, Om Sainath, greatest among the saints. Hail to you, O compassionate one, laden with virtue and excellence of a constant, unchanging nature. O Supreme Spirit, O boundless, faultless, O glory, faultless one, glory to you. Out of compassion for your devotees and mindful of things which are inconceivable to them, you appear to the devotees under different guises to help them overcome obstacles. Baba was also a divine incarnation who appeared to uplift the lowly and meek, to destroy the vicious, uncontrollable demons of evil desires in the devotees. All those who came for his darshan with a pure mind drank deeply of his blissful self realization. Their hearts overflowed with joy and they swayed to the rapture of love and devotion. On the feet of Sai Samartha, the most virtuous one, I, a lowly, a poor, meek creature, prostrate humbly in obeisance. I now continue from the previous story where I had narrated how a devotee suffered from malaria was cured when the black dog ate curds and rice. How a dangerous disease, cholera, disappeared by his raising the index finger by giving taran to drink and roasted peanuts to eat. Similarly, how the colic of one, earache of another, and severe tuberculosis of another were destroyed merely by Sai's darshan. How by Sai's grace Bhimaji enjoyed peace and happiness, and how he surrendered with gratitude to Sai ever afterwards. Equally novel is the president is the present incident, and as unique a miracle as the earlier ones. Knowing too well how eagerly interested the listeners are, I shall now narrate it. Remember, it's not me who's narrating, it is Hemant Pant, whose real name was Govind R. Dabulkar. So remember, he was called Hemant Pant by Sai when he first met him. So do go back to the first chapter where Sai calls him Hemant Pant. So yeah. So going back, I'm just reading from Hemant Pant's book. How by Sai's grace Bhimaji enjoyed peace and happiness, and how he surrendered with gratitude to Sai ever afterwards. Equally novel is the present is incident and as unique a miracle as the earlier ones. Knowing too well how eagerly interested the listeners are, I shall now narrate. If the listeners are not attentive, how will the narrator be inspired? How will the narration exhale? How will it be infused with life and spirit? And then what can the narrator do? For he is totally in the power of his audience. They are his main support, through, through whose response the narration gains in spirit and beauty. The life of a saint it is naturally fascinating from within and without. For his way of life, his food habits, movements, behavior, everything is charming. Even his casual utterances are full of sweetness. Indeed, this is not a mere life story, it is a life supporting water of self rejoicing which the all merciful Sai Maharaj has showered lovingly on his devotees as a means of remembering him. Speaking how one should conduct himself or oneself worthily in this worldly life, he actually showed them the path of renunciation. Such truly are these stories of saints which deal with both worldly and spiritual life. Their purpose must be that one should be happy in the worldly life and yet be always alert and wakeful about one's spiritual welfare. So the purpose of this human birth is fulfilled. It is only on the strength of the greatest merit accumulated in the past birth that a being gets this human frame. Quite unexpectedly, to add to it, when he also attains spiritual progress, it is a rare good fortune. But he who will not make the best of this opportunity makes of himself a senseless burden to this earth. How is his joy in living any different from that of an animal? Such a man truly is an animal without a tail and horns, who knows nothing else but eating, sleeping, fear, and copulation. Sorry, a page is stuck. Oh, how great is the significance of human birth! It is only through that the devotion and worship of God and the attainment of four muktis is possible. Through it alone will come self realization. Like a streak of lightning in the clouds is this worldly life, fleeting and transitory. Even a moment of happiness is rare to the people here, who are devoured by the fear of the serpent of death. Father and mother, brother and sister, wife, son, daughter, or uncle, they all come together momentarily as floating logs of wood in the main stream of a river. One moment they seem to come together, but are thrown apart in the next moment by the surging of waves, and once the parting comes, never again will the setting be the same as before. He who has not achieved his spiritual welfare in this world has made his mother suffer the birth pangs in vain, and unless he surrenders himself at the feet of saints, his life is a total waste. The moment a creature is born, he begins his journey towards death. So he who believes that death will not come today or wait until tomorrow or the day after is only deluding himself. Remember, I know it says himself, but it's also for women. So just think of um, like that when the translation was done or the writer was writing it. It's it's both for men and women. It doesn't matter. So let not the thought of death be away from your mind. After all, this physical body is but a fodder for death. Such is the characteristic of worldly life. Hence be alert. He who enters into worldly transactions with discrimination and wisdom will make spiritual progress effortlessly. Therefore, in worldly matters, there should be no slackness or indolence, sorry, or like laziness regarding the fourfold objectives of human life. There should be no disinterest or unconcern. Those who listen to Sai's story with love will attain the most excellent thing in life. Their devotion to Sai will grow, and the treasure of happiness will be theirs. Those who love Sai deeply will be reminded of Sai's lotus feet at every step. by this collection of stories. This story is an expression in words of what is inexpressible, an experience through the senses of what is beyond the senses, and hence, however deeply you may drink of these nectar sweet stories, there is no satiety, there's no satisfaction. You want something more. Inconceivable are the leelas of these saints. Indescribable is their greatness. Who has the power to describe them adequately in words? Remember, when we are talking about Sai, is talking about how you are, how, who you think of God. Like, it doesn't matter if you are a Hindu, Muslim, Jain, Sikh, or Christian, or whatever religion you are. But you know, whoever you think of, or how you think of God, um, you know, just take that in that sense. Like, this book is by or meant for all religions, and religion is just another way of talking, right? So, yeah. And as these tales fall on the ears all the while, Sai will come always before the eyes. He will thus remain in the mind, in thoughts and meditation, and in memory and day and night, waking and in dreams, sitting, sleeping, or eating. He will appear to you and will always be with you. Wherever you may come or go, in the crowds or in the forest, when he has thus become the object of deep contemplation, your mind will enter into the state of unmani. And when this happens every day, your mind will merge with the universal consciousness. But now let us begin the story referred to us at the end of this last chapter. Listen to this with respect, O listeners. Remember, when each of these chapters in the Sai Satcharitra is, first they talk about the wisdom and then they talk about the story so that they can bring it together. So when you remember the story, then you understand what the wisdom that they're talking about. So at least I think that's how I remember. But I forget, and then when I first read it last year, and now I don't remember anything, and I'm reading it out again. So hopefully, next time I read the book again, I will learn more. So, going back to the book, faith and devotion are like a feast of Shira Puri, a sweet dish. Like some people call it Halwa Puri in Maharashtra, they call Halwa Shira, so, and Puri, which is a deep fried bread. The more you eat it, the more you want. And even when you eat it to your full capacity, yet there can never be that complete satisfaction. I'm not going to say the word satiety because I don't know how to pronounce it, so satisfaction. So now, listeners, you listen attentively to the second story. You will be convinced of the great significance of the saint's darshan. Outwardly, Baba seemed to do nothing. He did not even leave his seat to go anywhere, but sitting in one place, he knew everything and gave proof of it to all people. And this was like common among these saints all around, like in India. They had a network, I think, like they had the watchers, Um, when you read the Marvel comics, they talk about the Watchers. They are the defenders of the universe, and so is Sai, and there are other saints too. So, and you would be lucky to come across them, yeah, even come across their teachings. Sorry, I'm digressing, so going back. Outwardly, Baba seemed to be doing nothing, but he knew everything. Brahman or Sat, whichever is in our bodies, is also present equally in the entire universe. Always remember this and consecrate your body in God's service. Know that he who has surrendered to Brahman will only see oneness in it. And he who believes in duality will be caught in the chain of births and deaths. Duality is in like seeing God out of you, but Brahman, oneness is where you believe that God is in with you. You know, when Jesus said, think of your body as your temple of God because God resides in you, remember. So when it resides in you, it resides in others too. So you respect others too, whether it's man, woman, animal, whatever, even wind, air, water, they all are, yeah, they all Brahman, the oneness that you have to experience. I don't know. I hope I'm trying. I'm trying myself. Know that he who has surrendered to Brahman will only see oneness in all, and he who believes in duality will be caught in the chain of deaths and births. The intellect that firmly establishes duality is truly ignorance itself. The mind is purified by coming into contact with the Guru. Because of him comes the attainment of the state of self realization. Release from such ignorance is in itself the realization of the oneness in all things. How can there be a state of complete oneness if there is even a trace of duality in the mind? From Brahma, it's right down to the immovable objects in this universe. Whatever exhibits a different property from the Brahman appears as non Brahman to the indiscriminating mind, although it is really Brahman from every angle. Because Brahman is in and out, like if you think of yourself out of Brahman. So, if you are in Brahman and Brahman is in you, I I still cannot get that saying. I'm still trying to understand that. I hope you do. Yeah. And when you do, please come and teach us too. That which is by its nature the most profound knowledge of every sort has no place for duties of worldly life, has wiped off all traces of name or form, and that indeed is the Brahman without appendages or parts. Because of its natural tendency to consider itself different from Brahman, and from the blunders arising out of ignorance, temptation, the mind which is distracted by the illusion of duality becomes calm and peaceful as it attains the knowledge of this oneness. He who does not feel that I am different, people are different, who sees this world as one, filled with the one and the same spirit, he finds nothing that is separate from himself. To regard name, form, doing of actions as obstacles, to give up altogether any idea of duality itself, to become Brahman. I alone am, and there is not a place where I am not. I pervade all the 10 directions. Nothing exists apart from me. Hold fast to this one idea. Thrust aside Maya that deludes, bearing in mind that there is nothing that is separate from me. Concentrate your thoughts on the self. Listeners might naturally ask, how this duality arises at all? Brahman is the object of knowledge. While the being is the one who tries to get this knowledge, by what means then can this feeling of duality be removed? Even the slightest trace of duality in the mind will destroy this complete oneness and at once give rise to a sense of differentiation which becomes the cause of births and deaths. When the darkness of ignorance is dispelled, the whole creation seems to dissolve. The vision is filled with oneness of self with everything. The illusion of duality disappears. When pure water is mixed with pure water, it all becomes one. What it was before and what it has become now appears as inseparable without a trace of difference. The logs of wood differ in their shape, but as fire they are indistinguishable. Sorry. Uh, they lose their separateness, their shapes merging into one mass as fire. Similarly, the knowledge of oneness of the Atman needs no other proof. The Atman dwells in all living creatures, but is always without a form. False, conflicting notions cause delusions in the mind, all the same, and hence the mind is always agitated by experiencing the sufferings of birth and death, etc. He who has overcome the obstacles of name, form, etc., has attained to a state of God realization, is a Siddha, unharmed by Maya, and always self absorbed. Sri Sai is such a state personified. Blessed are those who were fortunate to have his darshan. The moon seems to be in water, but it is really outside. So are all the saints who appear to be surrounded by devotees and are inwardly detached. Forever in the midst of devotees, they have attachment nowhere. The minds are absorbed in the self, not, I mean, the self with a capital S. Nothing else appears before their vision. Such are the great sadhus and saints, though God, whose words God speaks himself speaks. For them, nothing is unattainable, nothing unknown. There are innumerable gurus and shishyas in this world who give and take spiritual instruction, but rare indeed is a guru who gives actual experience along with knowledge. But now, enough of this prelude. Let us proceed with the main story, whereby my listeners who are full of eager anticipation may be enriched by what they hear. At Nanded city in the Nizam's kingdom, there lived a Parsi merchant who was very religious and well loved among the people. His name was Ratanji. He had abundant wealth and extensive property, carriages, horses, farms, and woodlands. His doors were always open to all, from where no one went back spurned. Though outwardly he was immersed in this way, in the ocean of joy day and night, inwardly his mind was hemmed in all the time by the alligator of great worry. It is a divine law that no one can enjoy pure, unalloyed happiness. To some, it may be one thing, to others, it is another. Each one has some sorrow or longing. One may say, I alone am great in all this prosperity and opulence, and puffed up with empty pride, may begin to walk on the wrong path. But it seems quite clear that, lest an evil eye be cast on the faultless, perfect one, God Himself leaves him with a slight blemish, just such as a mother smears a little black, like lamp black, the kajal, with her finger on the child's cheek to protect him from an evil eye. Opulence of wealth, of gold that Ratanji enjoyed, made him generous with food to everyone who came to him. He would help alleviate the sufferings of the meek and the poor. He always appeared to be cheerful, Thus, from a point of view of the world, Shethji was happy. Shethji, that's what they used to call someone who was rich in those days. Even now, they do call people Shethji um, in India. But this joy of wealth is always of little use to him, who has no son. One after the other, he had no less than 12 daughters. How then will he enjoy even a moment's pleasure? How will this mind be ever at peace? Remember, like everyone wanted a son, even now they want a son to carry on the name, right? So, Hari Kirtan without loving, devotion to God, song without rhythm or musical notes, a Brahmin without the sacrificial thread, you know, where they wear. Um, where, oh, where is the beauty in all this? Proficient in all arts, but without the discriminating knowledge of good exemplary conduct, but without kindness and compassion for all living things, where indeed is a grace in such one. Forehead bearing chandan marks and the neck adorned by tulsi necklaces. But if the tongue derides and mocks the saints, wherein lies a virtue and sanctity? Pilgrimages without repentance, ornaments without the necklace, a household without a son, from where will they derive their beauty or joy? Will Narayan bless me with at least one son? Such was his musing every day. His mind would not be rid of the worry. Due to this, Shethji was sad. He did not relish food or drink. Day and night he felt dejected. His mind was always full of worry. Who will take care of him, the property, because daughters get married and they go off. So, oh God, remove this one blemish of my on my happiness and make me free of stigma. Give me but one son to continue my family line. Save me, O Prabhu Raya, from this disgrace. He had great faith in Das Ganu, and it was to him that Shethji related his heart's secret desire. Das Ganu said, "Go to Shirdi, the ardent wish of your heart will be fulfilled. Take Baba's darshan, make obeisance at his feet, and tell him in detail your secret wish. He will bless you. Go, you will prosper, for Baba's ways are inconceivable. Surrender to him wholeheartedly, and you will be happy." The idea appealed to Ratanji. He made a firm resolve to go. Accordingly, after a few days had passed, Ratanji arrived at Shirdi. He went to the mosque for darshan, prostrated himself at Sai's feet. Love welled up in his heart as he looked up at Maharaj, a, a mine of greatest, highest virtue. He opened up a basket of flowers. Taking out a flower garland, he put it round Baba's neck lovingly. Then he offered at his feet a profusion of choice fruit. With great reverence, Ratanji then sat down near Baba in all humility and now listened to his prayer to Baba. When the people are in great trouble, they come to Baba's feet and he protects them immediately. This is what I've heard, and hence I have come all the way to see you with an ardent wish, which I shall respectfully relate at your feet. Please do not turn me away, O Maharaj. Baba then said to him, "And so, after all these days, you have come to me. Give me first whatever dakshina you wish to give. Only then will you get your satisfaction." Whenever anyone came to take darshan and began worshipping his feet, he would first ask for dakshina, be he a Hindu, Muslim, or a Parsi. And was it just a modest sum? a rupee or two, or an aggregate of five? Not at all. He would ask for 100, 1,000, a lakh, and even a crore if it pleased him. Offered once, he would say, "Bring more." If told the money was over, he would say, "Do go and borrow it." And when it could not be borrowed from anywhere, only then he would stop asking for it. He would say to the devotee, "Do not worry in the least. I will give you pots of money. Sit quietly with me and give up worrying." In this world, everyone has someone or the other, but we have nobody. Only Allah is there for us. Remember, when he says Allah, he means every God, whatever you say. Like you say Krishna, he'll say Krishna, he'll say Allah, he'll say Buddha, whatever you want. So, what I want is one who will love me dearer than his own life. And to such a one, I repay 100-fold of what he gives me. He may well be a millionaire, but even he was ordered by the Maharaj to borrow some dakshina, and that from a poor man's house. Whenever a rich or a man or a poor man, poor, weak, and moneyless, or a beggar, but Sai never differentiated between them as one being less important than the other one more. Thus, whoever he might be, he would obey Baba's command respectfully. Shedding off all his conceit, would go to the houses of poor people to beg for money for Baba's sake. In short, under the pretext of asking Dakshina, Baba was really teaching his devotees a lesson in humility. A doubt may arise in anybody's mind. Why does a sadhu want wealth? But when carefully thought, the doubt will be resolved quite easily. Sai is if Sai is one fully satiated in all his desires, where is the need to ask for dakshina? How can he be called desireless who asks his devotees for dakshina? He to whom a diamond, a flint stone, a copper coin, or a gold one both measure equal in value, why does he spread out his hands for money? He who gives alms only to sustain himself and has taken a vow of austerity and renunciation. To such a detached, desireless soul, why this expectation of darshana? He upon whom the Ashtasiddhis wait with folded hands, at whose command the Navnidhis are readily laid open, to such a one, why the state of wretchedness for money? Having abandoned the pleasures of worldly life with contempt and turned away from heavenly bliss, equally with scornful indifference, why should such a detached sadhu who knows where the good lies require money at all? Those saints, sadhus, righteous souls who have reached perfection, whose life is dedicated to the welfare of their devotees, why would they require wealth? Why should the sadhus require dakshina? The mind should be really free of all desires. They become fakirs but cannot withstand temptations and are in pursuit of money all the time. For the first darshan, he accepts the dakshina. For the second darshan, he again asks for dakshina. At the time of leaving, once again Baba says, "Bring dakshina." Why this dakshina at every step? In the ritual worship, water is given for devotional sipping, from the palm of the hand after a meal. Water is then offered for washing hands and mouth, and then perfume is applied to the hand and betel leaf pan is offered. After all this is over, dakshina is put in the end. But the order followed by Baba was most unusual. As the sandalwood paste was applied, or as he was being adorned with consecrated rice, etc., he would be he would accept dakshina to be offered to him at once. Expect that you give dakshina. Even as a prayer of adoration at the beginning of the puja commenced, he would ask for dakshina, and the dakshina had to be offered to the self existing Brahman at that very moment, which should normally come at the end of the puja. Yet, this doubt can be resolved without making any effort. If you pay attention for a moment, you will be quite satisfied. The object of accumulating wealth is to be able to spend it in charity, but instead it gets expended mostly for petty sensual pleasures. Wealth facilitates wealth facilitates dharma. From dharma comes knowledge of the supreme being. Money thus takes on the spiritual path, which brings peace and happiness to the mind. Initially, for a long time, Baba did not accept anything, but would only collect the burnt matchsticks and fill his pocket with them. Whether a devotee or otherwise, he would ask for nothing from anyone. If someone placed a copper coin before him for one, of one pice or two, half a pice in those days, like it was called a pice, he would he used to buy tobacco or oil with it. He was very fond of tobacco and used to smoke a bidi or a clay pipe filled with it. Limitless was the service rendered by this clay pipe, for it hardly ever remained unkindled. Later, someone thought, how could he go for like how could he go for a saint's darshan empty-handed? That is without dakshina. So he took some dakshina with him. If a didaki was given to Baba, he would put it in his pocket. If anyone placed a coin of 2 pice, he would return it to the giver all intact. For a long time, this was a practice. Later, after some time, Baba's fame spread. Devotees flocked to Shirdi in large numbers. Baba's puja began to take place with all the rites and rituals. Now the worshippers knew, on the authority of Shastras, that no puja can be concluded with the offering of gold, flowers, and dakshina. While sprinkling sacred water at the coronation of the king, or while worshipping his feet, the worshippers bring offerings and presents in the same way. For the Guru Puja, Dakshina is to be offered. Those who offer Dakshina attain to a higher state, heaven. Those who offer gold attain the highest knowledge, that is moksha. Those who give gold become the pure of heart, say the Vedas. So say the Vedas. By applying sandalwood paste comes sanctity and purity. By offering consecrated rice, one gets longevity. Flowers and betel leaf pan bring wealth and prosperity. Similarly, offering gold and dakshina gives the fruit of opulence. Just as, just as sandalwood paste, consecrated rice, flowers, and pan are important in the puja ingredients, so also are the dakshina and gold and flowers, which give the fruit of increasing wealth. Dakshina is necessary for ritualistic worship of a deity. Also, and so it is also as a concluding ritual of a vow. An offering of a present of gold is required. All the worldly transactions proceed on the basis of hard cash. To live up to their reputation and honor, people spend liberally on such occasions. If dakshina becomes ac- acceptable for the puja of a deity by the recitation of a mantra like Hiranyagarbha Garbhastha, then why should it not be for a saint's puja? While going for a saint's darshan, different people go with different ideas, each according to his knowledge, and about this, any unanimity is rare. Some go with faith and devotion, some to test the saint's power, while some others feel that if he can read what is in their minds, only then he is a saint. Some pray for a long life, some for elephants, gold, wealth, property, some ask for sons, grandchildren, etc., and some for undiminishing constant power. But Baba's ways were most astonishing. Those who came also to mock, to ridicule, they stayed to worship his feet, the evil minds being destroyed altogether. Had they not been fortunate enough to have even this much, they would at least repent at heart. Their faith, being confirmed by direct experience, would overcome their ego, and yet these were all common, ordinary people, very much involved in the worldly life, and Baba wished them to become pure of heart by giving dakshina. The Shruti Yagnen Danen Tapas, Tapasa explains in clear words that those who are anxious for self knowledge will find a secret in the giving of dakshina as one of the means of attaining it. The devotee, whether a seeker of material or of spiritual end, has to give dakshina to his guru for the fulfillment of his desire in his own in his own interest. Even Brahmadev told his three children, God, demon, and man, the same when they asked his advice on a completion of the period of celibacy. He instructed them in the syllable Da impressed on their mind by asking what each understood by it. Truly, the Leelas of Guru and Shishya marvelous. Practice restraint, God interpreted. Be merciful, the demon understood. Give in charity, so thought man. Well done, fine, said Brahmadev. Gods are none other than men, differing from them only in their disposition. Men endowed with excellent qualities but unsubdued senses, they are called gods. Even the demons dwell among men, are those who are vicious, cruel, and prone to violence. As for men themselves, they are tormented by uncontrollable controllable greed or avarice. These are the three types of among men. Hence, to pull the greed engulfed man out of the abyss of avarice, Sainath, the ocean of kindness, takes his devotees out by, like out by the hand, wishing for their welfare. The 11th Anuvak, or the section of Taittiriya Upanishad, describes many types of gifts. Listen to each one of them. To begin with, whatever is to be given should always be given with faith. For if given without faith, it bears no fruit. Out of fear for the king's command, for the dictates of the Shastras, or at least out of shame, something should be given. Even at ceremonial occasions like weddings, some gift is to be given to fulfill obligations of friendship. Such are the dictates of social custom. So Baba too asked his devotees the same, as indicated by the word "duh," and each one understood differently, right? And for their own good, be compassionate, be generous, give generously, subdue your senses, you will experience great happiness. Guru Raya was making the use of this short monosyllabic mantra for his devotees to destroy their threefold faults of unsubdued senses. Lust, anger, greed are not conducive to self upliftment. They are very difficult to conquer. Hence was this easy way recommended. As in the Shruti, so also in the Smriti, has this been made up, has this been approved. But I give it below so that the listeners may be able to follow it properly. The gateway of this hell leading to the ruin of the soul is threefold: lust, anger, and greed. Therefore, these should be abandoned. Srimad Bhagavad Gita, chapter 6, 16th, verse 21. Know that lust, wrath, and avarice are the three gates to hell, which leads to self destruction. Hence, they should be scrupulously abandoned. Lust, anger, and greed. Most merciful Sai Samarth asked for dakshina only for the good of his devotees. He was educating them in renunciation. Of what great value was that dakshina to him? And what significance was his spirituality? Who would not instantly lay down his life for the Guru's word? Indeed, of what use was the dakshina to Baba but for the spiritual welfare of his devotees? For his subsistence, for his life, he did not depend on their dakshina. He didn't need dakshina, he just gave it away at the end of the day. All that money that he received from his devotees, he would just give it away. He collected alms for sustenance. Hence, there could be no selfish thought behind collecting dakshina. His only object was that by giving dakshina, his devotees would become pure of heart. According to Vedic saying mentioned above, the Guru Puja cannot be complete, hence, unless a offering of dakshina is first made. But now, enough of this treatise on dakshina. The significance is amply clear that dakshina was not asked for out of greed or selfishness, but only for the benefit of devotees themselves. So let us know now proceed with the detailed narration of the story. Listen to Sai's wonderful Leela on Ratanji's offering him dakshina. Listeners would be gracious enough to listen attentively to this marvelous story and see for themselves Sai's all pervasiveness, remarkable nature. When he asked Shethji for his dakshina, Sai narrated to him an incident of the past, but Shethji could not remember it, and hence was quite puzzled. I know that you have given me 3 rupees and 14 annas. Now give me the remaining money which you have brought with you as dakshina. Since this was Baba's first darshan, Shethji was quite astonished to hear Baba's words and tried hard to recollect when he gave him that money. Never have I come to Shirdi before, nor I have sent anything from anyone, he thought. Such being the case, what Sai Maharaj is saying is really puzzling to me. Is really a puzzle to me. Never had such a thing happened at all. It made Ratanji feel most embarrassed. He gave dakshina, bowed at Sai's feet, but the riddle remained unsolved. How the subject was left at that, Ratanji then narrated the purpose of his visit, prostrated again at Baba's feet, and sat down with folded hands. At heart, Shethji felt completely satisfied and said, Baba, it was indeed well that my good fortune I had your darshan today. I am a luckless one without much knowledge. I know nothing about puja, yajna, but my good fortune I had today, the darshan of one who knows the past, present, and future, and is wise. You know my anxiety too well. Remove it, O gracious one. Do not push this faithful devotee away from your feet, O all merciful one. Sainath was moved by pity and said, don't worry needlessly, your misfortune is on the wane from hence. He then gave Udi Prasad in his hand, placed a hand of benediction on his head, and blessed Shethji with the words, Allah will fulfill your heart's desires. Ratanji took permission and returned to Nanded. Then he related to Das Ganu in detail, in his proper sequence, all that had happened at Shirdi. I had a proper darshan and was delighted. Also had his assurance along with the prasad and his blessing. Everything took place in the most satisfying manner. But there was only one thing I did not follow. Of that Maharaj said to me, I did not understand at all. 3 rupees 14 annas you have given me. I know. What is that Baba said? Please explain to me this clearly. What rupees, what annas? How could I have given anything to him before? This was my first visit to Shirdi. I do not understand the significance of this in the least. At least I am not able to resolve this. To me, it appears a great mystery, a puzzle I cannot solve. Can you at least solve it for me? This was indeed a mystery. Das Ganu began to ponder what is the significance could this be? But he could not make up his mind. After some deep thinking, he suddenly remembered, and the figure of a Muslim saint called Mauli Sahib suddenly came before his mind. Born in the Muslim community, his way of life was that of a saint. He worked as a potter, living a life that fate had ordained for him. But a detailed account of his life will only lead to a digression from the main story. Everyone in Nanded knew the life story of Mauli Sahib. So when it was decided to go to Shirdi, Mauli Sahib had casually and of his own will had come to Shethji's house. Both had boundless affection for each other, and Mauli Sahib was offered flowers, garlands, fruits with proper rituals. On that occasion, Shethji was inspired to give a light meal to Mauli, and Das Ganu was at once reminded of the expense incurred for that. The list of expenditure was called for, and every single pice was accounted. It was then that all of that added up, the total tallied perfectly. It came to exactly 3 rupees and 14 annas, neither more or less. But then Baba should acknowledge the receipt of it, and it only amazed everyone. It revealed Baba's many faceted personality. Sai Maharaj is a treasure of knowledge. Sitting inside in the mosque, he knew the past, present, and future, in which part of the world it might occur. All these saints, they all know about each other, and in a way, they are the same. It's yeah. Since they have already realized Brahman, and they're coming from Brahman, they are Brahman. So it's just that we don't realize it, so we don't know. We still think of it as different. So, okay, I'm digressing, going back. Unless there was oneness between all living beings, could Sai Samath have experienced this or told others? Nanded is miles away from Shirdi, both being divided from each other by a considerable distance. Moreover, both the saints were unknown to each other. How could Sai receive the telegraphic message then? Any thought of separateness that I am Sai Maharaj while Mauli Sahib is somebody quite different was not present between the two of them. Mauli Sahib's Atman was the same as that of all others, yet blessed indeed is he who will understand the secretness of oneness between the two, between all. Though outwardly inhabiting, two separate bodies, inwardly both were one at heart. In fact, to use the words they both is itself not proper at all, for they were never separate. In knowledge, in spirit, in their aims and objectives, they were one. Both were the same essence of the same disposition. No doubt, great distance separate between Nanded from Shirdi, but their hearts, their life force, their bodies were as one. And hence, this telegraphic message to each other was possible. Remember at that time, Neem Karoli Baba said that Baba was his brother, and you had, I forgot, Akal Kod Swami Sai Samar, as I call him Sai Samartha, but it is Swami Samartha, and um, all knew of each other. They were separated by distance, but they knew, and yeah. So it's like they were one spirit, just in different bodies. Yeah. Oh, how astounding are these sadhus and saints, who are as vile as telegraphic machines. Whatever happens in the universe, wherever it may happen, they know all about it. Later, after a suitable passage of time, God rewarded Ratanji. His wife became pregnant. The tree of hope sprouted into a leaf, and on the auspicious moment his wife delivered, the blessing came true. To the great joy of Ratanji, a son was born to him. After years of drought, there should be a sudden downpour of rain. Such was Shetji's joy and satisfaction at the birth of a son. Thereafter, as time went by, the family tree began to spread out and blossom. Being happily laden with sons and daughters, Ratanji was now fully satisfied. But even thereafter, he continued to go for Sai Darshan. With Sai's blessing, all his desires were fulfilled. Ratanji was filled with joy. In the spring, the mango tree was laden with fruit, but not all the fruit will ripen. Of the 12 sons, only 4 survived, and today they live happily. And even tempered that he was, Ratanji accepted willingly, and without the slightest regret, what had ordained by fate. And now for the significance of the next story. This whole creation, animate and inanimate, is pervaded by Sai. Anyone can just sit still anywhere and experience it for himself. But how Guruvar was pleased with the faith and devotion of a poor, humble man from Thane, whose surname was Cholkar. How this man took a vow before Sai, whom he had never seen before, and how his wishes were fulfilled. He was given personal, direct experiences. What is a bhajan without love, or reciting a sacred text without understanding its meaning? And where, oh, where is God without faith? It is not all an effort in vain. A forehead without the auspicious kumkum mark, knowledge without actual experiences are all futile. These are not the words of book learning. Experience their truth for yourself and then judge. Why this book is about Sai's Leela, you may ask. It is a purpose. I do not know. It is Sai who got it written through me. He alone knows his purpose. And it's Sai who's making me read this book. So he's making me learn. Moreover, to write such a book requires a man of spiritual authority. But I am but a servant of Sai, who keeps his records by his command. I am only a slave of his command. His listeners are as the thirsty chatak birds, while Sai Samath is a blissful rain cloud, who showers rain through these stories to quench their thirst. May this body roll over and over in the dust at the feet of that power which moves my speech and whose life I narrate. It is he who prompts my speech. It is he who narrates his own story. May this fickle mind of mine become steady and steady fast at his feet. May this bhajan be not only physical but also mental, and bring me everlasting joy. For I am just a meek and humble messenger of Sai. The narrator and the cause of the narration is no doubt Sai himself, and yet is the listener separate from him? No, for he is not remote from Sai. To all appearances, this is just a life story, but in reality, it is all Sai's sport. He has himself become the loving sport maker, and he has started this powerful play. Sai Baba's life is inscrutable. He has made me his instrument and given amazing experiences to the devotees. Thereby, he satisfies his own innumerable devotees. There is no mere life story, it is a story of happiness, the sweet nectar of salvation, which can be enjoyed only by the most fortunate who has faith and devotion. I have toiled hard to write this book for the peace and happiness of the devotee, and we, the devotees, may always remember the greatness and marvel of the Guru's grace. And when related with loving devotion, the story will enhance the pleasure of all the listeners in listening to it. When read over and over again, the moral lesson of the stories are translated into practice. It will increase devotion and love. When listened to day and night, it will snap the bondage of Maya, temptation, the consciousness of the Triputis will disappear, and the listeners will enjoy happiness. Hold fast to Sai's feet. Hemant surrenders to him wholeheartedly and remains prostrated at his feet forever without leaving them even for a moment. We'll be to all. Here ends the 14th chapter of Sri Sai Satcharitra called Ratanji's Meeting with Sai. As inspired by the saints and virtuous and composed by his devotee Sri Hemadpan. Om Sai Sat.